I'm sure we'll have some more folks dripping in, but
Okay.
let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to our Parkinson's Point education session. And it's really nice to see you guys again today. Today we have Vicky, Sarah, I'm not going to say your last name right,
Segra.
Sergio.
Yeah, no problem.
And Janell DiGiorgio joining us. And they're from Dr. Kumar's office, the Rocky Mountain Movement Disorders Center. And they're here to share with us some of the ongoing clinical trials and research they have going on right now for people with Parkinson's. And so I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves a little bit further. And thank you so much, guys, for being here today and sharing this with us. We really appreciate it.
Very good. So I'm Vicki. I'm a nurse practitioner. I've been working with Dr. Kumar ever since 2001, actually. So basically, we do, of course, clinical research, and also we do just regular Parkinson's management at our office here in Denver. And then Janell.
Yeah, I'm Janell DiGiorgio. I'm a research coordinator here with Dr. Kumar. I've been here since 2010. So we have quite a few enrolling trials right now for early Parkinson's, late Parkinson's, and dyskinesia studies right now.
Yeah. So we'll be going through that. So let me see if I can try to share this screen. Can you all see this?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Good.
All right, let's see if we can make it do. That's a little bit bigger. Is that okay?
That's good.
All right. So basically, this talk is to basically discuss the, why do we do research? How does research performed? And basically what kind of research that we have here at the center. All right, so I'm gonna make the little picture so I can read it there. So basically, research in Parkinson's is conducted with human volunteers. And the reason that we do medical research is to add to medical knowledge about new treatments or the disease state or new pharmaceutical products. And basically what we're doing is looking for new ways to treat Parkinson's, prevent Parkinson's, or detect different diseases. It can be Parkinson's or other disorders as well. Primarily, most of the clinical research is looking at new investigational medications or investigational devices to determine if they're safe and effective in treating conditions. When you perform research or participate in research, safety is always number one. Placebos are required to prove effectiveness of any new investigational medication, and we'll get a little bit into placebos in a minute. So there's two main different types of studies that we're doing with Parkinson's. One category we call interventional studies, and that's where people are given new medications or an investigational treatment. So an investigational treatment that wouldn't be a medication would be, say, a specific type of physical therapy to treat walking and balance in Parkinson's. And the interventional studies may be used to treat symptoms such as wearing off of Parkinson's medications, but also a lot of the new studies that we're looking at are to possibly delay the progression of this disease that we know gets worse over time. Observational studies basically are more for gathering information and looking at cause and effect relationships of one thing or the other. So we might be looking at, people's genetics. And so why does this person you know, with their genetics, let's say they progress faster or slower, and what is it? So we're just kind of looking more into getting more details about Parkinson's. And the question is, why should people participate in research? And number one, it's to advance the science and knowledge about Parkinson's disease. And participating in research helps to develop newer and better treatments for people with Parkinson's disease. I have to say, over the course of time that I've been working in movement disorders, we've developed several new medications, and the treatment and response to treatment of Parkinson's disease is dramatically different today than it even was 5-10 years ago, because we've developed these new great medications to treat symptoms. And the other reason that people should consider participating in research is that maybe they might have access to new investigational medications that aren't available to people outside of studies or clinical trials. Any questions so far? You all can always just interrupt me if you have a question about something specific. So why placebo? So we use the placebo to prove the effectiveness of whatever treatment we're looking at. So this is a way that researchers can measure how the drug works by comparing to how two different groups react. If there's no difference between the placebo group and the people taking the actual medication, then we can say this doesn't do anything. There is something we call a placebo response, and I looked this up recently, and I kind of disagree with these percentages. But what we find is at least 16% of people taking placebo in Parkinson's studies get better. And honestly, I think it's probably double that. It's at least 30 to 40% of people that are taking placebo get better. And why is that? It's because when we have like expectation, or if you're excited for something, then you actually in your brain produce more dopamine. So in order to prove that a drug works, you have to overcome that placebo response, which I find just kind of amazing. And that's true. There's placebo responses in cancer studies. There's placebo response in every study, depending upon even, you know, any diagnosis.
Vicki,
Yes.
quick question. I just gave a talk on Saturday to a group down in Jacksonville, and we were talking about the placebo effect. I understand how it works for medicine, but one of the patients in the group that I spoke to had a good point. When you're the person with Parkinson's, what do you care? Whether it's placebo or the drug, if you're better, if you feel you have better balance because you're taking a shot instead of a pill, or, you know, whatever it would be, from the person with Parkinson's perspective, I can see big picture. You know, we want to know or try and find a cause for Parkinson's and or a cure. But from the perspective of the person with Parkinson's, placebo or not, you feel better. You're doing better. You're living life better.
True. That's true. And, you know, what I tell people is, you know what, if it's a placebo response, we'll take it.
That's right. When, you know, if you come up with something to stop a tremor, my right hand would quit tremoring so that I could type or write, my life just got better.
Correct. Correct. That's a good point. All right, so there's a timeline of development. You know, these new drugs take quite a while to get from, you know, just an idea in somebody's head to actually something that's on market. And so essentially, so that researchers, they decide that they've got something they want to look at, then what they will do preclinical trials. So that's oftentimes in animals, giving animals that are induced with a certain disorder to see if there's any difference and make sure that the drug is safe in animals also. The sponsor of a study is a company or agency which develops a investigational medication. And so what they do after they do preclinical trials, they submit a request to begin testing a new item in human volunteers. Institutional Review Board is basically an ethical review board which looks at the medication. They look at, what have you done with this? What's all the data that you have up until we're going to be considered to do human studies. And then they review the ethics of the research itself, and then they also monitor research in humans. Studies that are conducted, the data is analyzed, that we go through different phases. There's phase 1 clinical studies, there's phase 2, phase 3. So they keep looking at the same investigational product in, in different, first human healthy volunteers. Then you look at it with people with whatever disease, if it's Parkinson's disease, just to make sure that we have safety. And then you go to phase 2, we're still looking at safety. Phase 3, you're looking at safety and efficacy of the drug. And then if it gets through all these hoops, then you submit all of the information to the Food and Drug Administration to decide if there's enough evidence that the medication is safe and effective. And if so, if it's helpful, then it would be available for people. On average, it takes about 8 to 10 years for new drugs to go from, they call it bench to bedside, but sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower. And again, the phase 1 studies, they look at specifically safety. And then several of the medications will drop out, that maybe they cause liver function tests to increase, or if there's something that's just not right, then it doesn't make it to a phase 2 study. So with each phase of study, you look at this investigational treatment in more subjects. So it's safety, and some effectiveness in phase 2. And then we look at safety and then also dosage finding of the drug in stage 3. Phase 4 clinical studies are actually after the drug is on the market. So, that is something that's ongoing after you start a new drug. Did you have a question?
Yeah, Vicki, the final column, mine is cut off a little bit on my screen, but is that the number of drugs that survive and move on?
It's about the percent of drugs that are successful and that will move on, correct?
Yeah, okay, so that there's kind of a mortality rate of them as we find out things go amiss or don't go amiss.
Right. Do you know the statistics? There's a statistic, they say like every 500 molecules that they think is going to work, like maybe 2 or 3 make it through.
Oh, I don't
It's
know.
like there's a lot of dropout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, thank you.
So if you look at different times that people, in different phases that you are with, like early, mid-stage, and late-stage Parkinson's disease, you look at different types of studies. And so if you look at, if you're newly diagnosed as having Parkinson's disease, you have to look at what's the philosophy of treatment? I mean, do you put everybody on Cinemet because you diagnose them? Or, do we have to treat people? And we say that, when we first diagnose somebody, sometimes it's, they decide not to do anything. They don't want to start medication because they're actually doing okay. They just want a diagnosis. Some people have symptomatic treatment, and if there's they don't need symptomatic treatment. and maybe giving something that might slow the progression of Parkinson is better? Or do they, really, are they struggling and they need symptomatic treatment? So there's different ways that we can kind of look at like what you do when you're first diagnosed. And everybody's different. And some people can, they want to slow the disease progression. They don't feel like they need symptomatic treatment, even though I might look at a person and say, well, your symptoms are not mild, but we want a mutual goals through the healthcare provider and the patient with Parkinson's, just to be kind of holistic when you treat the person. Does that make sense what I said? I kind of talked in circles there a little. So the first study, which is quite interesting study, is by a company called Neuron 23. It's an observational study. And why would we do observational studies in Parkinson's disease? So with Parkinson's disease, we know that there's a protein that becomes kind of knotted up or misfolded. And so the Neuron 23 study basically looks at alpha-synuclein and other biomarkers so that we can, determine if we can get better at diagnosing a person with, if we think that, there's Parkinson's disease and there's some more rare disorders that look like Parkinson's disease. And so we think that the biomarkers are different in one person compared to the next. And so the Neuron 23 study is looking at biomarkers for people with Parkinson's. And this is, again, observational. We're not giving medication, we're not giving treatment, but we are looking specifically at blood and spinal fluid to determine if we can find biomarkers that are unique in people with Parkinson's disease and other disorders such as MSA and progressive supranuclear palsy.
Is this the study, if I could, a quick question, is this the study that they're obviously fluid from your spine is a little tough to hand out, let's say. But I think I read about a study where they're also looking at the skin on the back of your hand and the buildup of.
There's some skin biopsy studies as well. The skin biopsy, and that's again looking at that alpha-synuclein in different parts of your body. So you can, they oftentimes look at the back of your neck or the side of your leg or your ankle, because they think that those proteins that are misfolded are in the nerve endings and those parts of the body. And so that's one that you do skin biopsies to look for those biomarkers. The Neuron 23 study, actually, we look at blood and CSF. There's a lot of fear of getting spinal taps. And I have to say, pretty much most people know somebody that had a terrible headache and went to the emergency room and had what we call a traumatic spinal tap. And so the Neuron 23 study, it's a lot more controlled, and probably the worst part about it is getting that, it's like when you go to the dentist and you get that like lidocaine shot. That's probably the most painful part of this, because we use lots of lidocaine and people really shouldn't have pain or feel any problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what they say about minor.
How to do them, who has good experience.
That's true. But you know what they say about minor surgery? That's surgery on somebody else.
Yeah, there's when I was in nursing school, they said there's no such thing as a minor procedure. If it's whatever, if it's getting a shot or if it's having open heart surgery, it's not minor to people. Yeah. Okay. And then there's another study for people with early or Parkinson's disease. It's called the PADOVA study. And this is a study looking at an agent that we think might slow the disease progression. And so the whole philosophy behind this treatment is, again, we've got this misfolded alpha-synuclein. And what we think is that it sort of leaks out of cells and it's picked up by downstream cells. And this agent is what we call a monoclonal antibody that that we think comes in, and when the bad protein leaks out of cells, it comes and scoops it up, so then it can't leak into downstream cells, and that they think that this is going to slow the progression of Parkinson's. And the way it's administered, actually, it's an intravenous infusion of this medication. So people come in, what is it, once a month for an IV, and basically stay here a couple hours. And then in the meantime, we look at progression of people that are using this drug, that we don't know who's on the placebo and who's not, that we do extensive assessments on these people as they go through the course of the study. So this next study is called the LUMA study. And this is one that I just learned about. And so there are genes that are associated with Parkinson's disease. And one of the genes is called the LRRK gene, LRRK. And with that, we think that LRRK is responsible for essentially worsening of Parkinsonism, kind of in a weird indirect way. And so this study is specifically looking at people that, that we know that everybody has the enzyme associated with LRRK, LRRK, and that we think that might help turn down the gene and improve and slow the worsening of Parkinson's. That's oral medication, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And this is an orally administered medication. Okay, so now we're going to start thinking about, as things become more advanced in Parkinson's, when you're first diagnosed with having Parkinson's and you kind of take your medicine and you can miss doses and you don't notice that you miss doses. It seems like the med's great, and you don't get this sense that your medications kick in and wear off. And so what we call that is when people start noticing kicking in and wearing off of their Parkinson's medications, we call that motor fluctuations. And so the things that people will notice when medications wear off, as some of you might be able to testify, is that people will have tremors, slowness, stiffness, and those are the big wearing off motor signs. Sometimes people have non-motor symptoms when their meds wear off. They might get anxious, they might have some restless legs, kind of a icky sensation in their legs, or their arms also. Sometimes people get just kind of flat and they're less animated. But there's different ways that you can have motor fluctuations, so between motor and non-motor symptoms. And in conventional medications that we use to treat motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease are things like the MAOB inhibitors like Azilect, which is rasagiline or selegiline, COMT inhibitors, so that would be Comptan, Tasmar, and a newer drug called Ongentys or opicapone. Dopamine agonists, which are the Mirapex, Nupro, and Requip medications. There's other newer medications also to treat motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease. And so then we have to think, well, we've got these new drugs that we're looking at to treat motor fluctuations. And this is one that I just kind of learned about today. And it's this agent, it's still a just identifier, it doesn't have an actual name. It's NM201, made by BioV Pharmaceuticals. And so what this drug, it's a really unique drug used to treat, to see if motor fluctuations and dyskinesia improve with the administration of this medication. And it's this really unique anti-inflammatory medication. And with that, we think that inflammation is part of the problem with Parkinson's disease, that that causes the symptoms of Parkinson's, and also can be related to the people getting dyskinesia from their Parkinson's. So if we look at this novel anti-inflammatory, which is an orally administered medication, to see if it improves people's motor fluctuations and their response to medications in Parkinson's disease. So they're looking at both motor fluctuations and dyskinesia. The next study is the TEMPO study, and it's a drug that they've named tavapadon. And this is a really novel dopamine agonist. It's once a day, and we think that this can help the symptoms of early Parkinson's disease with the people that aren't on Sinemet. And also we think that it might help people with motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease. So this is a drug that's orally administered. They suspect that it doesn't have that sleepiness as a side effect that you commonly see with the medications that we have on the market, but it's right now in clinical studies. We actually did the phase 1 studies in this drug many, many moons ago. And so now we are in, I think, phase 3, right? So this drug is kind of pulled through several of these phases of clinical trials, and hopefully this will be one that we see on the market in the future. It would be nice for a once a day medication to treat motor fluctuations. And then this drug is for a company, Neuroderm, and this is called it's Boundless. I don't know, they might have a new name for the newer phases in this study, but this is a subcutaneous pump, kind of like an insulin pump, you get this continuous infusion of medications to treat motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease. And so this drug is, which we kind of call it's a little more invasive than taking a pill, because you have this little subcutaneous device that you carry around with you, and you get continuous medication infused to treat your symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So this would be for somebody that's more advanced than treatment of something such as the oral medications. So maybe somebody doesn't want to have DBS surgery, and so this might be another way that we can, offer something that's somewhat invasive, and that it's a subcutaneous injection, but can considerably, potentially improve symptoms of Parkinson's. Then we have dyskinesia. So once people develop motor fluctuations, which is usually about 3 to 5 years after you start Sinemet or levodopa, people can also develop dyskinesia. And this has to do primarily with a combination of taking levodopa, and also the fact that the disease has progressed, because as the disease progresses, you end up with cellular changes in your brain cells that make you more susceptible to having dyskinesia. And this is when medications are working, it's not a wearing off phenomenon, and it's characterized by like squirmy, rocking, writhing movements. And that can be in different parts of the body, from the head, trunk, right side, left side. It just depends upon the person. It's very different from person to person. And we don't have a lot of medications that are FDA approved to treat dyskinesia in Parkinson's. There's actually only one drug that's used to treat dyskinesia in Parkinson's, and that's Gocovri. And so there's a lot of side effects with the medications that we use to treat dyskinesia. Particularly, people tend to have more side effects as they get older. And so we're looking at new medications to treat dyskinesia and Parkinson's disease. So this medication is through Addex Pharmaceuticals. It's a dipraglurant. And so this specifically is a medication used specifically to treat bothersome dyskinesia and Parkinson's disease. It's orally administered and is in I think it's an international study, right? It's an international study used to treat dyskinesia in Parkinson's disease. So as we know, things move along with Parkinson's disease, walking and balance becomes more affected. People can develop freezing episodes or kind of hesitation in their feet where they're magnetically stuck to the ground, and that can lead to a higher incidence of falls. We know in a number of people with Parkinson's disease that it advances, that it can also affect memory and thinking, and people can develop what we call mild cognitive impairment or even dementia as the disease progresses. Right now with the memory and thinking problem and freezing problems, we at our site do not have any specific studies that we're recruiting for, but we're constantly looking for new studies. And I think there will be some studies coming up in the future with dementia and maybe mild cognitive impairment, I think also. And so for a site that does studies, people are contacting Dr. Kumar to look at potential studies that we would participate in for all different stages, from early to advanced Parkinson's disease and other neurologic disorders as well. But there's a lot of, as some studies end, then new ones begin. So things are constantly changing around here. And so we're constantly looking for new agents that we can test out to see if people can benefit from some of this research that we're doing. All right, so CenXL is now we've kind of rebranded I guess we're kind of CenXL is our research arm of our clinic. And Janelle here, and I think I spelled her name correctly. That's your email, right? Is the person to contact if you're interested in participating in any studies. We're actually looking for some non-Parkinson's patients to do, I didn't have that one on here, to do a skin biopsy. So we're looking for people that do not have Parkinson's disease to be controls for that skin biopsy study that we were talking about before. But make sure that you do send an email to Janelle if you are interested in participating in any studies or just talking about what we have that might fit for you. All right, now it's time for questions. You can just shoot any kind of question you want. Between Janelle and I, we should be able to answer it.
Feel free to unmute yourselves if you'd like. Feel free to ask questions.
There's just a lot of information.
There is a lot. There is a lot.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, I know it's a big decision to participate in research studies. Are there any things that or questions that you have that keep you from wanting to participate in a research study for people with Parkinson's? Any concerns?
I think for me, I'm fairly new in Parkinson's. I was diagnosed in October of 2020. And I'm on medication and it's working really well. And I sort of feel like I don't want to hurt anything that's working well. And, I think that's one of my concerns is like, as long as things are going well, I want to keep it that way.
That's true. And, there are more studies looking for people with early disease, like I was talking about, but then, as things start getting a little bit more difficult, where you notice that you start having some wearing off. There's a lot of conventional medications to take for wearing off, but also there are a lot of newer agents that you can participate in and at the time that you develop wearing off. There's kind of this time in Parkinson's when you first get medications and you're doing really well and you're not having motor fluctuations or dyskinesia. That's kind of the good time. There's not a lot of research that we have right now for people in that spot, unless it's an observational study. But there may be opportunities in the future when, if it's appropriate for you. Right, we got to make sure that that these agents are appropriate for the person.
Right. Yeah.
Vicki, maybe you could speak to what are some of the most important questions if I was a person with Parkinson's that I should ask when I sit down with either you or my doctor when I'm thinking about joining a study? Are there like 2 or 3 key questions I should ask?
You want to?
Trying to think what would be, what is the study?
Yeah, one of the things is, there's what we call an informed consent. Basically, when informed consents talk about what the medication is, they talk about how many people have been exposed to this medication. So if it's 20 people that have been exposed to this medication, or if it's 1,000, then that might help influence your decision, right? So, that's, again, what's the safety profile? And that is something that the sponsor has to show us in the consent for participation in the study. The other thing is time. So some of these studies really do take time. Some, usually if people are in some study over time, then they come in less and less because we know that they're tolerating the medication. But let's say I've got this big European trip I'm going in 2 months, for 2 months, because I haven't been traveling for the last however knows how long, like everybody else. But, it's more important for me to go on my trip than stay home and participate in a study. So you have to kind of see if it's going to fit into your life. If I have trouble driving, am I going to get transportation? Surprisingly, some studies will pay for a car to come pick you up and drive you to the site. We even have some studies that will fly people in to participate in research, and that's very from one to the next study. It's very different. The sponsors are all, have different ideas about what they, how much they will give somebody, such as if they're going to fly them in, or if they're going to pay for a car or a hotel or something like that to come in. But that's usually, it's all open information. It's in the consent.
I have a quick question. I noticed in President Biden's State of the Union speech, he talked about, I think he called it ARPA, A-R-P-A. But he was talking about getting Congress to authorize a lot more money for medical science for, diseases that impact older people, because America's getting older really fast. And so is the world for that matter.
That he talked about that cancer objective. I think that was about that. And he's also looking at specifically some of the diseases that are potentially caused by toxins that veterans are exposed to, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Agent Orange.
And some of the new stuff, these burn pits, apparently, there's all kinds of stuff that comes out of the burn pits that people were exposed to.
Yeah. When I look at the research dollars that are spent on Parkinson's as opposed to Alzheimer's, it's ridiculously small. What do you think? Do you have an opinion of why you think Parkinson's hasn't gotten the kind of research money that Alzheimer's, clearly more people have Alzheimer's, but I think as a disease, Parkinson's is growing at a faster rate.
It is. The rate of research is actually pretty fast now. There's, you go to these big international meetings and there's a lot of new information that we get about new treatments and research that's been performed. I think there's a little bit, it depends upon the community. We do a lot of Huntington's disease research, and Huntington's actually is a disorder that affects people's quality of life a lot faster and a lot worse. So I think that people with Huntington's disease are frantically looking for new things that might be better than what we have conventionally. And I think with Parkinson's, the conventional treatments are pretty good. So there's a little bit less of a drive, but I can have to say there's a lot more neuroprotective that studies looking to slow the disease progression now than there used to be. So I think that hopefully as a group, we're going to catch up with Parkinson's and research.
Okay. Stem cells, logic kind of tells me if the cells of my substantia nigra are dead, the only way to kind of bring them back to get them operating would be to, create some kind of regeneration perspective. Are you guys looking at any stem cell research? Most of what I read, it takes place in either South America or Europe.
Right. There aren't that many. If you look at clinicaltrials.gov, GOV, there aren't that many stem cell research opportunities, but a lot of the ones that are out of the country they're clearly not FDA approved if they're out of the country. And I have to say, I've had several of my patients victimized by places in Tijuana that you fly into San Diego and they pick you up in a limo, take you to Tijuana and give you a shot in the rear and say, there's some stem cells, give me $20,000. The next time I'll give you a discount, it'll be $10,000. So you have to be really, really careful looking out of the country for anything like that, because there's been a lot of patients really victimized by that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to do that no matter what you're doing, because it's your body you're playing with.
Right.
My last question, and thank you for this information, it's very current. I've lived with Parkinson's for 11 years now and seem to be, other than the tremor, holding it off at a fairly decent pace. Are there any, what I would call positive deviant studies, people that are two standard deviations to the positive for whatever reason, lifestyle, genetics, diet, nutrition, exercise, seem to be holding the disease off?
We do. We call them outliers.
Oh, outliers, right? From
Yeah.
Mr.
So there
McDonald.
are some people, and that's part of that, why we're doing these observational studies, looking at genetics, like the CSF studies that we're doing, because we think that there might be genes that modify the progression of diseases. In Huntington's disease, we're really looking at that hard, because there are, some people, you can take 100 people with the same repeat length of, the bad gene in Huntington's, and they're all different. And so now they're looking at genetics, and they found that some genes, some extra genes in your body promote worsening, like the LRRK gene, we think might promote worsening of Parkinson's symptoms. And then there might be some other genes that slow it down. And so that's one reason that we're really looking at these observational studies, so we can identify more, because that, we really haven't had a lot of good research on that kind of stuff. It's coming. I bet you in the next 2 years that it's going to be pretty amazing how much information there is.
Good. Thank you. You've been very informative.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So just as a reminder, you can email Janelle, and she's happy to loop you in if you had any interest in studies today. And then since your studies do change every month or two, what would be the best way for people to stay updated? Would it be to go to your website, or?
We don't have a lot on the website now. We've kind of found out that we can't do a lot of publishing on our website about these different things. But just to contact Janelle or contact our research center, and then we can talk about it over the phone.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing this information. We really appreciate your time. So
very good.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of
Nice
your
to
week.
see you all.
Thank you.